So we're live now, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Good morning to anyone who is watching, and this is a meeting of the Building, Lands and Procurement panel. It's being held remotely, and members are in attendance via video conferencing. The meeting is being live streamed and will also be available for repeated viewing. I'll begin by naming the members who are in attendance for the public record and ask members to confirm their attendance if they want to. I think I'll just read out the names actually. During the meeting, if a member wishes to speak, they will indicate to me and I will call them to speak in turn. Voting at the end of each item will be conducted by Democratic Services. I'd like to remind members that the County Council standing orders continue to apply to a virtual meeting, so please keep your microphone muted unless you've been called on to speak, and you may be visible on the screen to the public and other members even when you're not speaking, but you can turn off the camera if you wish. Now, the people that I have seen present as members are Councillor Bill Withers, Councillor Adrian Collett. I haven't seen Councillor Andrew Gibson. Is Andrew about?
He's not present at the moment, Chairman, no.
Councillor Keith House and Councillor Ridian Vaughan. And we have a full attendance from our supporting officers. So thank you very much. So apologies for absence. I don't think we received apologies from Andrew, so hopefully he'll join us later. Declarations of interest. If members have anything they want to say right now, please do. Otherwise, let's see where the discussions take us, and I'm open to people declaring their interests if it's necessary at the time. The next item is confirmation of the minutes. At page 5 of the ModGov pack are the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 8th of October. Do members agree that these are a correct record? I'll do this negatively. Does anybody have a problem with those minutes?
My memory doesn't stretch back that far.
Yes, I was going to say the same.
I would take those as accepted then. Deputations, I've no indication of anybody asking to speak at today's meeting. Chairman's announcements. The only thing I wish to say is how pleased I am that the virtual system is working so well. I think we're all quite comfortable with it now. So let's get on, because it is a big agenda, with the next item, which is the Business Services Group, the 2019-20 annual report and accounts. That's on page 11 of the agenda pack, and Sean Lepeak is going to present this item, and at the end of it we're asked to to approve the annual report and accounts. So Sean, do you want to take us through this?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, as you say, this is the annual report for the Business Services Group. Those are 3 self-funding business units in CCBS. That's HC3S, the catering service, HTM, the transport service, and county supplies. Obviously, this is the first to last financial year, which does seem quite a long time ago with everything that's happened since. However, it's important for us just to approve the annual report for the Business Services Group. In summary, it was a difficult financial year. Last year, we did have a deficit of £1.6 million across the group. That was primarily due to a number of factors. School meal uptake was lower than target. Food and staffing costs were higher than budget. And obviously, there was some pressure in the county supplies warehouse in terms of business levels being slightly lower than target as well. We obviously did have the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic at the end of March, and that led to a pressure in HC3S, which is a loss of meals income of £944,000. We are very grateful to the County Council for actually supporting the Business Services Group at this difficult time, and we did receive £931,000 of corporate funding to support that COVID-19 pandemic loss of income, which obviously is a very good position to be in within the County Council. However, what's interesting is that HC3S was actually on the road to financial recovery. As members will be aware, as we previously reported, there are some financial pressures, particularly within HC3S, but actually we were seeing meal numbers increase. in January and February last year, and we were also seeing food costs coming down and staffing costs also coming down. But obviously we did have the adverse impact of the pandemic. However, we would have been better than forecast by just over £200,000 if we hadn't had the adverse impact of the pandemic. So we were in a good position at that time. And that recovery does continue as well within HC3S, with meal costs coming down and staffing costs also being managed as well. Despite the trading pressures, I think it's worth noting that there was also some very good performance. So HC3S was once again re-accredited with the Soil Association's Food for Life Served Here Bronze Award, and that does recognise that a lot of the food is cooked fresh, and also a lot of the food is sourced relatively locally and at least within the UK. In addition, County Supplies retained 100% of its business across Hampshire, Portsmouth and Southampton, and also did win another 21 new customers from surrounding local authorities. HTM also did well and exceeded its target for new business with external customers and schools as well. In paragraph 10, we also note that besides also running the businesses did contribute to quite a lot of corporate initiatives. We've worked closely with Children's Services to reduce the cost of the courier service for the Children's Services Department and schools. And the three businesses lead on 3 of the climate change work streams within CCBS and on behalf of the County Council as well. By the end of March, we had replaced 41 existing diesel vehicles with electric vehicles, which is a good result within about 18 months of introducing that programme within HTM. And obviously we continue to provide good quality and healthy meals for the children of Hampshire. I think it's also worth noting, although this primarily relates to last financial year, paragraph 13 does summarise a few key points around the business unit's response to the pandemic. And actually we've been very active during the pandemic in terms of supporting customers and the County Council in that response. All services have been open and providing services to schools and other customers. And a key issue, I think, just to note is that over the Easter period and the half-term period, HC3S did provide a catering service to 5 primary schools whose private sector contractor was unable to provide that service during that period. So that is the benefit of having HC3S as an in-house business unit. And bearing in mind, obviously, we've got quite a lot on the agenda, Chairman. I won't take you through a lot of detail around the paper, but just alert you to a few key areas. In paragraphs 18 to 30, it provides much more detail around the financial position last year, which I won't dwell on. But I would like to draw members' attention to the position in the surpluses for the business units from paragraph 31 onwards. As you are aware, the business units do have their own surpluses, which form part of the County Council's reserves. And actually that does show that there was £3.8 million left in those reserves at the end of the last financial year. However, Appendix 2 does note that actually with the investment requirements for the business units, it is likely that actually there will be a break-even position on the surpluses over the next few years. So the position is financially very tight, as it is across the County Council as a whole, but it's just worth noting that situation. We only invest from the reserves where there's a business case which actually does stack up, and that business case is approved by the departmental management team. So we only invest where we can get a return on that investment. Paragraph 35 and 38 in Table 6 provides a bit more information around the key performance indicators for the business units. I won't go into those in too much detail, but it is worth noting, despite some of the pressures I've already mentioned, we do have some good performance around HTM's contract hire conversion rate. So they have won a lot of new business, and they did achieve a 57% conversion rate from quotes to orders during last year. And County Supplies maintained good service levels around availability of stock lines and deliveries on due days as well, and some good performance in those particular areas. I think it's also worth noting that although HC3S did lose some contracts during the year, it also did mobilise a number of new contracts and also won some new business. There was a net variation of a loss of 1 site during the year, but actually overall, by the end of the financial year, HC3S was still providing services at 491 schools and 6 non-school sites, so it's still a significantly large business. Just really by way of conclusion, I think it's worth just mentioning that the business units do a lot around sustainability. and that's explained in paragraph 53, and also continues to support a large number of apprenticeships across the 3 businesses to support young people in employment across the County Council. The report ends by, in paragraph 57 onwards, just talking a little bit about some of that response and recovery around the pandemic, but we will actually provide a more detailed report to members at a future meeting of the panel, Chairman. I think that concludes my introduction for this report.
Okay, thank you, Sean. I think the best way to structure this debate would be to invite member questions on the services in turn. So shall we start with the school meal service? Do any members got any questions or comments? That was very quiet. Sean did mention, and
Stephen, sorry,
sorry, Keith.
Just one of the issues we're going to have, I think, with this report is that, of course, it's exceptional in terms of the pandemic, and trying to structure what's 2019, 20, and what's 2021. In reality is the issue, because it's about recovery and how we go forward, because we can't really tell a lot from these figures, given the fact that we didn't have a conventional year end. I know we're going to cover recovery in the next paper, but the next paper talks more about operation issues rather than financial issues, and this seems to be the only slot on the agenda that we've got financial issues to cover. I just wondered whether we've got any learning already from 2021 that can impart us some clues as to where we might go for the future, given the fact that we lost the first chunk of 2021, which clearly we're going to have to write off. But we're now 1 month into what is the new normal in terms of education, in particular, and what we're learning in terms of school meal uptake so far.
Yes, thank you, Keith. You've proved one point. I did say to the officers when we had a briefing meeting on this agenda that members are going to be more interested in looking forward than looking back, and that's a good point. Sean.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Alice. Yes, that's a good point. As you are aware, there has been about an £8 million pressure for HC3S in this financial year due to lack of primarily paid meal income during the first 6 months of the year. However, the last few weeks has actually seen quite a considerable improvement in meal uptake and meal numbers, still slightly below previous years and below target, but actually we're seeing a weekly increase in the number of meals being provided, well over sort of 5 to 10% each week since the start of term this year. So it's going in the right direction. There's certainly pressures. Obviously, schools have to be COVID secure. So the team are serving a variety of different types of meals, sometimes in the dining hall if that meets the school's requirements. We're also providing quite a lot of hot and cold picnic lunches within classrooms as well. And certainly our view is that flexibility in terms of the type of provision is very important to maintain meal uptake. But I will still say there is still quite a lot of pressure, but it's definitely going in the right direction.
Thank you. And I suppose this is a question to Anne, but it's also to Sean. Where we have been impacted by the pandemic in terms of different uptakes and increased costs and so on, presumably that is being put into our returns to the government as to one of the impacts on Hampshire?
Indeed it is, Chairman, yes, it is being reported through that mechanism, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed, yes.
Yeah, so that's really important, I think. I was delighted that we actually were able to step in with HC3S to help schools where their private contractors were in difficulty. And I think that's something we should crow about, Sean.
Yes, indeed.
Anything else on the school meal service? Okay, Hampshire Transport Management. And any questions there? Yes, I see Ridian.
Yeah, thank you. Morning, Sean. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Sean's muted at the moment.
Thank you.
Okay. Sean, the increase in the electric fleet looks encouraging. Could you just say something? I may have missed it. Could you say something about charging points?
Yes, I think actually the closed paper covers that in more detail, actually, Councillor Vaughan. But actually, yes, we're still doing well in terms of charging point infrastructure. And actually that's getting, we can actually monitor usage of that as well, actually, across the County Council. Obviously, it has been slightly lower during the pandemic because there's not been so much vehicle movement, but actually that's a well-established charging infrastructure now at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Anything else on this one? Okay. And then the last one is county supplies. Are there any questions on the county supplies section? I see no questions coming through. Okay, then we are invited to make the following recommendations to me, that the 1920 annual report and accounts of the Business Service Group be approved. Is that the feeling of the panel?
Yep, approved.
Yes. Anybody against that? Right, I shall take that then as acceptance. Emma, are you happy that we've reached a conclusion without actually doing the roll call?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think that's a good way of voting. Anyone against, anyone abstain, and then everyone in agreement. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Right, well, I'll take that then as approved. The next item on the agenda is the property services operations responding and adapting to COVID-19 presentation.
Yes,
Okay,
if I can just take the lead here and introduce two of my colleagues, Chairman. So we thought it would be appropriate, given what's happened over the last few months, there's some detail in the following report, but we thought it was appropriate to give you a presentation about exactly how we have been able to respond and then adapt to the implications on the work we do in operations in relation to the recent pandemic or the ongoing situation. So I think Rebecca has come to a previous meeting. So Rebecca Thompson is the strategic manager for operations. And I'm introducing a new colleague to this meeting, Susan Thornton, who joined the council last year in 2019 as in a new role to bring together the soft and hard FM. So she's the senior FM and maintenance manager. So I'm going to hand over to Rebecca now to take you through the presentation, members.
Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning, Chairman. Now I'm going to share the slides on my screen, so I will just bring those slides up and perhaps you could let me know when they appear on the screen and you're able to see them. Hopefully they will just be coming up now.
Yep. See them now.
Good.
Well, I see PowerPoint now. You're not doing the, there we go.
Yes, you've got those up, have you?
Yeah.
Good. Right. I'll just make sure, apologies. There we go. Is that still clear on your screen?
Yes, it's in the PowerPoint setting now rather than the display.
Right, let me just position that correctly and then should allow me to bring that up in the slide display.
Yeah, that looks right.
Right, the problem with that is now I can't see my notes, so my apologies, I'm just trying to...
Do you want to do it from
that I think is the easiest there, if I do it like that, if you can see those slides. Does that work? Chairman, can you see those?
I can still see the front slide at the moment.
Yes. Okay, that's fine. Good morning, Chairman, and good morning, panel. Steve introduced us. So I'm Rebecca Thompson, Strategic Manager for the Operations Function in Property Services, and my colleague Susan Thornton is with me, and we will be sharing this presentation. And we're here to speak today about the work that Property Services has done in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, both responding to and also maintaining business as usual, including some work on behalf of the Local Resilience Forum and setting up some specialist buildings. We'll share how we've managed to continue the business as normal programme of work, as well as responding to COVID-19 and learning and adapting as we've gone along, as have the whole county council through this period. And we'll also talk about the work that we lead in managing the County Council's corporate office accommodation and the COVID security of the workplace that we've been involved in. In terms of supporting lockdown and recovery, obviously at the beginning of lockdown in late March, the majority of our property services staff who are office-based transitioned more or less overnight to work from home. But many
Becca,
of our
the slides are not progressing. Are you?
Are they not? Oh, they should.
Because what they are in the slides are in the agenda pack for members.
My apologies. I'm not quite sure why that's not progressing on the screen. Which slide could you see? You can't see.
So we can only see the title slide at the moment, and then because the slides are actually in the ModGov pack that members can see, so you might have to just describe it.
Okay, I'm not quite sure what's happened there in terms of bringing it up.
So if you go, if you say you're referring to the overview slide and then referring to the supporting lockdown and recovery slide, then members can see it. Okay. Or refer to it.
Fine. My apologies for that.
Rebecca, I do have a copy if you would like me to try and screen share, and you'll have to let me know when you want to move on to the next slide.
Okay, if I take it off my screen share, Emma, if you're able to see whether you're more successfully able to bring it up on the screen, that would be helpful. For members that are looking at the right, so if we go to slide 3, which is supporting the lockdown and recovery. So I was just talking to the fact that the majority of property services staff who are normally office-based moved to working from home in late March, but a number of our soft FM team remained in the workplace to ensure that critical operational functions such as cleaning and premises management, print and post continued throughout the lockdown period for those buildings that remained opened, and this included continuing to provide services to both police and fire operational buildings under our shared service arrangement. Property services maintenance and compliance teams also were involved in supporting the safe shutdown of many of the County Council's buildings, advising the local building managers on statutory activities that needed to continue in vacant or low occupancy buildings. And we also provided some of that advice out to community groups. The teams worked very closely with our term contractors to ensure that we maintained reactive maintenance support, particularly for the most vulnerable and operationally important sites, which included our residential care homes, our children's homes, and the police and fire sites. Throughout lockdown, our teams worked with colleagues across the County Council and partners to ensure that all the critical health and safety activities were maintained, and we supported building managers on property issues, enabling them to focus on their core actions in the COVID response. I think one of our most challenging achievements early in lockdown was the successful transition of the contracted cleaning services across the corporate estate, where we had a new contract coming in starting on the 1st of April, just after lockdown, going live across 160 sites with the transfer of nearly 100 contracted cleaning staff from a number of different suppliers to the new supplier, just at the point where there was obviously a real focus in all our buildings on maintaining cleaning standards. But actually that went very smoothly, and we had excellent cooperation from the supplier. Our compliance team has advised on statutory activities, and as lockdown eased and many of the County Council services transitioned to recovery, we supported the reopening of sites, ensuring that all of the necessary activities were undertaken to allow the buildings to open and be safe for reoccupation. And alongside our sibling services in CCBS, we have also led the way in interpreting and implementing the early government guidance for COVID secure workplaces, including the creation of a bespoke COVID secure signage toolkit, which is being used now across both the corporate estate and within schools. And finally, in our role managing contracted facilities management services, we worked with our cleaning and waste collection suppliers to step back up to more normal operations as the county council services reopened. Emma, on to the next slide. So this, throughout all of this period, we obviously were seeking to maintain progress on our normal programme of repairs and maintenance works. And construction was one of the few sectors that did not undergo an enforced shutdown early in the lockdown period, and major construction work on our major construction sites continued throughout. However, with a lot of the repairs and maintenance work taking place in occupied buildings, we did decide quite early in the lockdown period that it would be necessary to temporarily pause non-critical works so that we could establish how we were able to continue work safely, protecting both the building occupants and also ensuring that our contractors and our own staff were safe. And this pause also allows us to assess whether we had the resources to continue and ensure that any vulnerable or shielded members of our own team were protected. We were, however, quickly able to use the combined government and industry specific guidance to work with our contractors and work with all the county council building managers to restart the majority of our paused work with new protocols in place to ensure that everyone remains safe. We also worked closely with the supply chain to understand any restrictions they had, including impacts of furloughing of staff or any manufacturing or supply chain delays, so that we could make sure we were prioritising resources against the most important works and ensuring that they proceeded safely. And then throughout this period, our teams working from home were able to continue to progress the design and procurement of the 2021 repairs and maintenance programme, and that meant that we were importantly able to mobilise a substantial programme of work over the summer once some of the restrictions eased, and taking advantage therefore of the school summer holiday period and the better weather over the summer. And this was particularly important to ensure that we were able to progress priority works before the full reopening of schools in September. Our teams are continuing to work really closely with both schools and the county council sites, particularly those with the most vulnerable occupants, such as the care homes, to ensure that we can continue to deliver important maintenance work whilst prioritising the safety of those that are in those buildings. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Susan Thornton, who's going to take you through some of the specific activities that the property services teams have been involved in connection with the COVID pandemic response.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members. Emma, if we can move on to the next slide around setting up of specialist facilities. So property services have been able to react quickly to the emerging needs of the organisation and the local resilience forum created as a direct result of the crisis. With a broad group of professionals from various disciplines, this one team approach has enabled us to support 3 particular new facilities from start to finish. These have included the warehouse in Sedgensworth that was created to store and distribute stocks of personal protective equipment, emergency food and welfare supplies for those shielding during lockdown. Also the temporary mortuaries that form part of the wider contingency planning for the county, and Woodcote Lodge in Gosport, a specially created discharge to access step-down facility for patients leaving hospital before they go home or onto their longer term care arrangements. So our asset strategy team supported the search for new sites. Our estates team supported the contractual elements of the leases and licence to occupy. And our maintenance team and compliance teams undertook the surveys and managed any structural alterations and maintenance works, as well as the necessary statutory checks to bring the building systems back into use compliantly. Finally, our facilities management team carried out the various risk assessments and implemented controls, and now continue to deliver the day-to-day building support, including cleaning, fault reporting, deliveries and print. So I'll move on now, Emma, to making our offices COVID secure. So as we did elsewhere across the County Council, we made decisions to hibernate office buildings as people worked from home if they could. We contracted into the fewest possible buildings across the county, making alternative arrangements in the nearest open buildings for critical staff as required. And this enabled our facilities management team to focus on its cleaning and maintenance resources, cleaning and maintenance resources most effectively, with more frequent cleaning and hygiene regimes necessary to minimise the risk of transmission. But then as guidance changed and services began to recover, the team worked to create COVID secure environments that would enable staff who needed to return for operational reasons, or those that were finding it difficult to work from home for practical or wellbeing reasons, to do so safely. This involved risk assessing each building and implementing social distancing measures, reducing capacities, intensive cleaning, greater opportunities for hand washing, and also the effective use of mechanical and natural ventilation systems to aid airflow. We created online training as well as building induction packs to brief those returning on what to expect and ease the understandable anxiety that many will have felt. The County Council was keen to support those that were required to continue to work from home, and so early in the summer, as part of a joint project with IT, we began an exercise to distribute office equipment such as screens, keyboards and chairs to more than 6,000 members of staff. And although the government guidance remains to work from home where we can, our corporate office team continue to support colleagues through this next phase and plan for the new normal post-COVID. So we're creating innovative ways to use our office space, focusing on the aspects of face-to-face contact that we've missed both operationally and socially. We're working with departments to understand their future thinking so that when a more substantial return to the office is possible, we'll hold on to all the benefits of the things that we're learning to do differently. If we move on now, Emma, to the next slide. So in the world of facilities management, outside of a crisis, every day is very different. But even in that context, it's fair to say that during COVID, we've been pushed beyond the business as normal. We've already mentioned some of the work that we've done in supporting new facilities, such as the logistics warehouse, the temporary mortuaries, and we've also shared a little of the work that we've done to send IT kit and chairs home. But the scale of that project in particular was enormous, with over 22,000 items to be collated to achieve distribution in just 6 weeks, involved an enormous team effort. So my colleagues across property services stepped forward to support the facilities team and volunteered a few hours to remove screens from desks, carry out cleaning or manage the distribution points here in Winchester. Then in support of the wider organisation, we've been able to lend a few team members to the team in adult health and care as part of the redesignation process. We've provided dedicated administration support and deployed a building professional to work in care homes directly to help manage their own health and safety, property and non-clinical COVID secure activities. We also helped accelerate turnaround as demand for COVID tests began to peak by collecting and delivering samples to laboratories. And we've been really pleased to help community groups resume some activity on valued support sessions by working with them and sharing our own experience to carry out their own COVID secure risk assessments. So finally, if we move on to the summary slide. In summary, it's been a really busy but exceptionally rewarding time for the team in property services. We've provided cross-cutting support to the County Council as it focuses on all aspects of the COVID-19 response and recovery. With a broad group of professionals in various disciplines, our skills and knowledge have been able to support the COVID activities across the entire building, life cycle and operation. Our flexibility has ensured we've maintained compliance systems and supported business critical operations at a time when resourcing has been very difficult. This is thanks to the integrated approach that our own team takes and the strong relationships we've built with suppliers and colleagues across the organisation. We focused on delivering outcomes, finding quick, cost-effective solutions as the County Council has responded to the crisis for the residents of Hampshire. So finally, I thank you for your time, panel, and we're very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Rebecca and Susan. Now, we're going to be asked to note the contents of the presentation, but this is an opportunity where we can ask any questions, make any points, and the officers will also note what we say in case there's something that they want to incorporate into future activity. So members, any questions or comments, please? I see nobody waving at me. The temporary mortuary, that was a picture of the one you're setting up in Basingstoke, I think. That was on the slide. I hope we don't have to use it.
Indeed.
Yeah. Keith, I think you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just a comment really, as much as anything else. I mean, that was a very interesting presentation. I suspect that most councillors will be interested, perhaps not quite in such level of detail, but a simple summary, because, you know, we're all interested in what goes on in the offices and how we've coped with these situations. So it might be worth just pruning it and sending it around to everyone.
I think that's a good suggestion. Thank you. Yeah. Do I see anyone else's hands up? You spoke about new normal. My feeling is that if we are sensible as an organisation, we won't go back to how things were before COVID. We'll incorporate some of the things that we've learned, including the use of Teams, which we're doing now, and working from home into the new normal. And one of my questions, which you can't answer at the moment, but it's a question, is will we be able to reduce our office footprint as a result of new working practices?
I'll let Felicity come in.
I see Felicity.
Put her hand up, Felicity.
I think the answer to that is going to be yes. In fact, we have already started to review accommodation across the board, and I would expect to see some reductions coming in soon, and then there's a longer term review that will see others making their mark. But I would expect to be able to reduce the accommodation in due course.
Yeah, and I think that's important. It's not something that we thought of immediately when COVID started, but in the light of experience, it seems an opportunity available to us. The other question I was going to ask, because it concerned me, I did ask that you put some guidance out to the community centres which had been shut down because static water can cause Legionnaires, and I know you did that. Have we had any reports of unexpected consequences like that?
No, we haven't. I think we worked very closely with all of our sites and with police and fire and the schools to share that guidance and make sure that all the necessary activities were done. And everything seemed to go very smoothly, actually, in terms of both the shutdown management and then the reopening of buildings. So we've had a really good network within the County Council that's worked very effectively to make sure everything operates as it should and remains safe.
Good. Members, any other questions? Oh, I see Bill at the bottom.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just want to add that the excellent work that the team has done in upgrading the schools, particularly Alderwood Senior School, has had a great effect on the results this year, made it a much better environment for the kids to go to school. And I think we tend to forget sometimes that the FM work that is done throughout our schools does have an immediate impact on the students. So well done there.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
I think that would be a good thing to incorporate into our resolution if members feel that it's right, to note the contents of the presentation and to thank the officers for their efforts during this time.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members.
Oh, I see a hand at the bottom. Is that Adrian?
Yes, it is. Yes, if I may. Well, first of all, to agree with everyone else in appreciating the tremendous work that's been done over the last 6-7 months, and the full presentation that's been given today. I think Keith is right. It would be good to let all members see that, maybe at one of the member briefing days, because I think there'll be a lot of interest. I think the issue of where we go in the future, obviously it's too early to come to firm conclusions on that, but there are quite a few aspects of it that I suppose there are some that are very obvious, such as the cost savings, both in terms of buildings, but also in terms of where travel costs are paid for councillors and so on. But also we're getting on later on to our climate change impact and CO2, and a lot of people not travelling all around the county all the time because they no longer need to is another benefit that needs to be understood and harvested. I guess it will throw up a challenge for EHCC in terms of how we manage workloads for staff when staff are not right there in front of us, but that's not really what this committee is all about, so I won't say any more on that today. No. But clearly there's a lot to be learned from this.
It's a very interesting point, and I can't resist just responding, because one of the things that has either been done explicitly or implicitly is that instead of managers sort of making sure that their employees turn up and look like they're working hard, we've actually got to have management by output, by objectives achieved, because they're remote. And yes, that seems to have gone seamlessly, or perhaps it was happening anyway, but it's a change of practice that other organisations might wish to call on our experience.
Yep.
Right, I think the feeling of the committee is to note the contents of the presentation and to thank all the officers who've been involved in keeping the County Council functioning as well as it has over this difficult time. Is that, do I summarise correctly? Yeah, I see heads nodding. Anybody in dissent on that? Okay, well, shall we adopt that then as our resolution on this one? Emma, are you happy?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And we'll move on then to item 8, and thank you to Rebecca and Susan. We'll move on to item 8, which is managing the built estate.
Yeah, which Chairman Rebecca is going to present, going to introduce this report as well, because it does relate to the stuff that was in the presentation, but it's a specific report.
Thank you, Steve. So the report on managing Hampshire's built estate is a progress update on the delivery of the 2020-21 repairs and maintenance programme for both the corporate estate and the schools estate. Members of the panel will be aware that we normally bring a report setting out the planned programme for the coming year to the panel in March, but that was obviously impacted by the lockdown. So decisions on some critical decisions on the programme for this year were taken under the urgent decision measures early in the lockdown period, so that we were able to progress with commitment of the budgets and progressing the work. And that included a number of the named schemes that had been identified in the capital programme earlier in the calendar year, to allow those to proceed to design and subsequently procurement. Susan and I in the presentation identified some of the additional activities that the team has been involved in, but also noted the progress that we've been able to make on the business as usual programme of work. I won't therefore go through the report in too much detail, but we'll just pick out some of the key points. So I've noted from paragraph 10 onwards the impacts of COVID-19, but our teams were able to relocate themselves to working from home and very quickly continue with progressing the programme of work for design, so that we were able to move forward into procurement even while we were in the lockdown period and pausing some of the existing work on site and restarting that. That allowed us to make good progress during that period, as well as supporting the buildings in terms of COVID response. I would particularly note under the section on management of health and safety, the work that has been progressed over the last year to complete a substantial programme of fire safety surveys on our highest risk properties, which are identified as those that provide overnight accommodation and therefore present a particular risk in terms of fire safety. And this was a substantial programme of work out of which we are now delivering a programme of fire precaution repairs and improvements, which will be completed over the coming few months. We also maintained all of our normal programmes of repair and inspection work, including management of Legionella, tree surveys, and received a very good outcome of substantial assurance on an audit of our health and safety procedures for projects. In terms of the corporate estate, we have continued to progress the planned works for the year, but we have also been taking a very rigorous approach to reviewing that programme of work in light of the wider financial pressures of the County Council, as I've highlighted in paragraph 26. To ensure that all the works that we're delivering are absolutely necessary, and that we are making sure that that funding is prioritised to the most important areas of work. We will be progressing quite a substantial programme of work this year, but we are very aware of the potential pressures on the corporate estate repairs and maintenance budget for the coming year. On the schools estate, the main funding source is the schools condition allocation, and members will be aware, as noted in paragraph 29, that the Prime Minister announced in June an additional £560 million for repairs and upgrades to school buildings. And from that, Hampshire County Council was awarded an additional £8.1 million of schools condition allocation grant in the current financial year. So that was in addition to our existing £17 million worth of grant. We are currently reviewing and working through the next priorities to which we will allocate that additional funding. We anticipate that that will include about half of that funding to the next priority SCOLA recladding projects, and the other 4 million we anticipate will be allocated for some of the broader programmes of condition improvement and maintenance work that we have identified that will cover across the schools estate. But those priorities will be confirmed and incorporated into the capital programme where appropriate as named schemes early in the new calendar year. Progress, as we noted in our presentation, progress on the schools programme has been good despite the lockdown, and we were able to get a substantial programme of work to site over the school holidays, as well as making good progress on the design of the larger schemes, which will then be ready to go to site next spring and summer. In terms of finance, paragraph 33, I've noted that the total value of the repairs and maintenance programme for 2020-21 is now approximately £57 million, so a very substantial programme, of which 11 million is the corporate estate and 46 million for the schools estate. And we continue to manage carefully to ensure that that is prioritised against the most significant needs across the estate. And then finally, in paragraph 44, I've made reference to climate change and noted the work we do to incorporate energy saving measures wherever possible as part of the repairs and maintenance programme, including improving the thermal performance of buildings when we do recladding projects and re-roofing projects, and looking to replace older plant and install improved controls. We are in the process at the moment of preparing some bids for the government's decarbonisation scheme, and we are hopeful that if we secure that funding, it will be for programmes of work which will also address condition-related issues across the estate, as well as making a significant contribution to the climate change objectives. And And we're also in the progress, as noted in paragraph 44, of implementing a new asset management system, which will improve the digital platforms we have available to manage the corporate estate and work with our building users on the safe occupation and effective use of those assets. So, Chairman, I will finish there to allow any questions from the panel.
Thank you. If I can kick off, Rebecca, you've spoken in the report about how you've successfully kept the quantity of work going. Have you had any challenges on maintaining the quality of that work and monitoring it differently during the lockdown period?
I think we've worked very closely with our suppliers. As you will be aware, Chairman, we operate through a number of term contract and framework arrangements, so we are able to establish good relationships with our suppliers. And we have been focusing in the last couple of years on the quality of the work on site. So we have maintained close supervision through our teams who continued to go out and visit works and visit sites through the lockdown period to ensure that works were progressing to the appropriate standards. And actually that opportunity to go out to visit sites has proved beneficial to our teams and beyond managing the works effectively, as it gives them the opportunity to be doing something as part of their working routine that is more normal, and ensure that they're not just working from home all the time. But no, we've not seen any particular challenges apart from some of the suppliers finding that they've had some supply chain issues at times in terms of materials. I visited a project last week where we're waiting for a roller shutter that was being manufactured in a factory in Bolton and was being delayed because of the particular lockdown challenges there.
Okay, so you haven't had to take any retrospective remedial actions because of problems?
Not because of problems in terms of the quality of the work, no. We continue to supervise that and ensure that projects are signed off appropriately and the necessary checks happen on site.
Very good, thank you. Members, any questions or comments? It's looking quiet. Okay, we're invited to recommend again to me on the bill to state that the progress made in the delivery of the 2021 repairs and maintenance programmes is noted. That the additional schools condition allocation funding is noted, and the impact of COVID-19 and the steps taken by property services to mitigate this. That should be noted. Is that the feeling of the committee? Yeah, any dissent? Great, I've seen a lot of thumbs up, so we'll take that one as agreed as written. So thank you very much again, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to the Property Services Commercial Decisions Report. And Steve is going to present this item.
Yes, I'll introduce this, Chairman. So thank you. This is, as it's a year since BLAP came together, this is a new format of reporting spend decisions, which brings them together into one report called the Property Services Commercial Decisions Report. And it covers everything that is now in my portfolio. So that's including all of the hard and soft FM and maintenance and the like. So there are three proposals here, three recommendations here, which will go forward to your decision day to follow this meeting, Chairman. The first one is spend on the re-procurement of ground maintenance. We have a term contract arrangement which will enable things like grass cutting, landscaping and tree management that expires in 2020. And we're going to replace that with a series of call-off contracts up to a maximum value of about 5 million. And more importantly for this is not just the county council's activities, but it's an access to a compliant procurement route for schools and partner organisations, including police and fire, particularly important for schools in terms of site management activities. So we're going to do it as a series of allotted arrangements, which enables the right size of contractors to be available to provide the service for those that need it and can access it. The second decision is in relation to printing. So the current contract is due to expire in the autumn of 2021, and this is both for local printing, if you like, in offices, but also for our high volume production printing, which happens in the print service, which is based in the basement of E2 South. And what's important here is that it also ties in with IT services who are in the process of reprocuring the next digital network, Hampshire Public Services Network. And the most important thing for printing is a move to what is called encrypted internet printing, but is in fact, as we would commonly know it, cloud printing services. So this is a print contract for up to 5 years with a maximum spend of 5 million. General print spend has been coming down, and we anticipate that to continue as a result of more remote working, more digital working, but we still need high volume printing, and we'll still need the facilities that are in the basement in E2 South. Then finally, the third one is the existing framework and call-off contract for heating oils and road fuels is due to come to an end in March 21. And so we're proposing to procure a new 4-year framework, which will comprise of 2 lots. Firstly, for traditional fuel as we know it, but secondly, to include hydrogenated vegetable oil, HVO fuel. Sean actually made reference to this in his earlier report, but it didn't come out in the conversation, that HTM are piloting the use of non-fossil fuel related vegetable oil fuel. And if that's successful, we'll have this procurement arrangement which would enable vehicles, the larger diesel vehicles, which can't be converted to electric, to be converted for use of vegetable oils. In fact, I should say converted is not the right word. They can use the fuel without conversion or changes to the mechanics of the vehicle. So those are the 3 procurement and spend proposals, Chairman, in introduction.
Thank you, Steve. I'll invite the members to comment on this, perhaps one at a time. So the little one, any comments on the approving of a total contract spend of 5 million over 7 years on the ground maintenance side of things? We happy with that? It sounds like we are. Okay. The second one is to approve total contract spend of up to 5 million over 5 years for the print services contract, which I'm delighted to hear is a reducing area of expenditure. Members seem content. And approve a total HCC contract spend of up to 30 million over 4 years under the heating oil and road fuels framework arrangements. Any comments on this, members? Okay, I'm going to take silence as assent here. Anybody have a problem, please shout now. Right, I think that's gone through then, Steve. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item then is climate change and energy programme update. Steve, this is you again.
Yes, thank you. This is a fairly lengthy report, members, but there's probably a lot to say, and there's a lot been happening over the last year since the panel met. There's no recommendations specifically here, but this is what I would call a sort of report about the transition where we are moving from the focus of our carbon reduction activities to date for the last 10 years have been in relation to our corporate buildings, street lighting and officer travel, which is what we were required to report to nationally, to broaden this out into a much greater and much more challenging aspect of all of our carbon emissions. So I'll go on and explain a little bit more later about how the scope of those are covered. The good news is, however, that we continue to make excellent progress on reducing our carbon emissions in relation to the narrower scope. So you can see here in paragraph, in paragraph 7, that we are well on track to achieving our 50% reduction. I would expect us next year, though, to return once we've done a lot more work on ascertaining the scale of our emissions, to come back, obviously, with a new set of broader targets. Key to what's been influencing this has been what's been happening nationally and globally, but also the declaration that the County Council made in 2019 of a climate emergency. So if I can, from paragraph 12 onwards, we have set up what we're calling an energy and infrastructure work stream. And this takes on board what the County Council's requirements are in terms of the declaration of the climate change emergency, but also needs to look at increased resilience of the impacts of a 2-degree temperature rise. In paragraph 13, this is important because this draws out what the new scope we have to work to in terms of greenhouse gas emissions through the national protocols. So scope 1 is the direct carbon dioxide emissions from the heating of the corporate schools estate, together with greenhouse gas emissions from the rural estate. So we've not measured methane and nitrous oxide before, and so we're having the challenges of attempting to measure this based on the best knowledge we have about the rural estate. Scope 2 is the indirect carbon dioxide emissions due to electricity consumption within the corporate estate and schools estate and street lighting. So these are emissions which come out of actually the grid generation. So they're not direct emissions. And thirdly, which is the most challenging to get to grips with, is the indirect CO2 emissions as a result of the manufacture, transport and construction of county council buildings and highway works. So that's often referred to as embodied energy. So how are we going to trying to find ways to make sure we can measure the embodied energy in our council buildings and highway works? Because I suppose one of the phrases I would use would be, if you can't measure it, then you can't actually do anything about changing it. Paragraph 14, it draws out, these are very early estimations, members, but we estimate that the energy and infrastructure work stream is about 125,000 tonnes in scope, and all three, so that's 1, 2 and 3, would be a total of around 200,000 tonnes. So if you compare to that what we were previously measuring was in scope for our carbon reduction programme, something around the 20 to 30,000 tonnes, you can see the significant scale of the challenge. So we are currently working through how we measure these activities, and we've been commissioned the Carbon Trust to assist us. That's been happening corporately to help define what the emissions are. Moving on to from paragraph 24 onwards, this is more of what we would have traditionally reported to you members on an annual basis, dating back to 2010. So you can see in the table in paragraph 24 that our journey has been one from about 54,000 tonnes in 2010 down to just under 29,000 tonnes in 2020. I suppose the point I want to make here is that there's no doubt that achieving carbon neutral by 2050 is a significant challenge, not one the County Council is going to be able to do on its own. It will require activities of our suppliers, national change in relation to continuing decarbonisation of the grid, etc. But where we have had opportunities to introduce programmes and to look to reduce our carbon footprint, we have been successful in doing so. Paragraph 27 onwards draws out some detail of the various programmes which we've reported to members in the past, including LED lighting and electric vehicles. I think Councillor Vaughan, you were asking earlier about where we are with the electric vehicle charging point framework. We've made very good progress. Our intention was always to ensure that the use of electric vehicles would not be determined by the availability of our own EV charging points. So we have, over the last year or so, installed a significant number of charging points across the county. I think 126 fleet and 12 public. But also we are facilitating a number of other authorities through the use of a framework we established to deliver just under 400 EV charging points to date. Paragraph 28 onwards is about the work we've been doing in relation to our energy and gas supplies. So we've recently reprocured contracts, and we've been working hard to make sure that our billing arrangements, etc., are as efficient as possible. And it was announced recently at Cabinet that the County Council, we will purchase what's called Renewable Energy Guarantee of Origin, referred to in paragraph 29, REGOs. So REGOs, for a relatively modest charge of around £32,000, enable us to get guarantee that the electricity we buy comes from a renewable source. And we're currently in dialogue with the schools to see whether they collectively would do the same for their electrical purchase. I've mentioned all about liquid fuels in paragraph 32. Paragraph 33 talks about the work we're doing in relation to water services. And of course, that will come into play more when we look at the issue of potable water and the 2 degrees rise in temperature. And I'm sure there will be some further impact there. In terms of paragraph 34, Rebecca made reference earlier to the announcement that was made for a £1 billion grant to support, which is like green growth plan for jobs in 2020. And thankfully, the SALIX, who are the organisation who will be involved in the reviewing of bids, also approached us before the bid inquiry came out. So we were able to hopefully influence the nature of the bids. And this is twofold, which will enable local jobs in the local economy to be facilitated, as well as reducing carbon over time. The inquiry came out in, I think, just last week or 10 days ago. So we're looking quite carefully, principally at a programme of things like replacement windows and replacement boilers. And we're intending to bid in the not too distant future, probably sometime in November, because there's some quite tight timescales to deliver on this activity. But we're searching, Chairman, for any possible source of grant funding, particularly given the County Council's stretch resources for the foreseeable future. And I think that's all I was going to say in introduction for this important topic, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure you're going to get some questions. And I see Adrian has put his hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the figures in paragraph 24 showing the progress that we've made, the excellent progress we've already made in terms of reducing carbon emission. I'd like to understand the relationship between those figures and the figures in paragraph 14 under the Energy and Infrastructure Work Scheme. I presume they're two totally separate.
They're included, Adrian. So anything that's in the, maybe I didn't make that clear, but the carbon emissions which come out of our corporate estate, the street lighting and the business travel are included now in scope 1. So that will all, so that what I meant by transition earlier on is we're in a position where by next year we will have measured or have an attempt at measuring and be clear about all of our carbon emissions on the total scope, which includes direct and indirect.
Right, thank you. My second question is relating on paragraph 24 to the street lighting line.
Yes.
Tremendous progress from 26,000 down to 10,000, which is, very, very significant. And obviously we go on this sort of thing, you go for the low-hanging fruit first wherever you can. It seems to me there's still some low-hanging fruit there. Why are we switching on 100,000 streetlights at 4 in the morning? It seems bizarre to me that we're switching all those streetlights back on so early in the morning. I realise there are some people about, but there are people about at midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning coming home from nightclubs and so on. So why are we switching them all back on at 4 in the morning?
I couldn't answer that question, Adrian. I'd have to refer that to colleagues in ETE, but I can find out for you and come back. I am aware, though, that there's another phase of LED conversion to LED going on major highways, on the principal routes, the ones that are on most of the time during night. But I don't know why the 4 o'clock time was selected, I'm afraid.
I have passed your comment on already, Adrian, to the Cabinet.
Thank you.
And Rob Humby is the decision maker here, because you made this comment at the Policy and Resources Select Committee.
I did, yes.
I found very interesting. I think the answer is that when we started to switch off the street lights, the political outcome of that was obviously going to be that people were worried about security and increase in thefts and so on, which the police advised would not happen and which in practice I think has not happened. So I think you are right to ask that question and to see whether there is a later time that they could be switched on and more savings to be made. I think it's a very interesting point.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for picking up the point from P&R.
Yeah, Bill.
Interesting, Mr. Chairman. We've had quite a few complaints about the lights not being on between that period, particularly as the winter approaches and it's getting very dark, and particularly with those people that go to work about 3 o'clock in the morning, and particularly females who feel unsafe. And I think one has got to note that although some aspects of crime have depreciated during COVID-19, there are a lot of people hanging about in the deprived areas and wards that are doing things that really the police should be handling during midnight and 4 o'clock in the morning, affecting the welfare of some of the residents. So it isn't as simple as just saving money. There's a lot of people in the deprived areas that feel quite actually scared and not safe due to the fact there's no lighting. I mean, I can understand the reasons for it, but I'm getting feedback certainly from the wards in Aldershot South, where you've got masses of flats, blocks of buildings, that those residents that do work have an issue with no lighting.
Thank you. Keith.
I suspect we'll never get a consensus on streetlights, because my take would be somewhat different again, which is that actually the period between 12 and 1 in the morning is quite still an issue in some areas, whereas I can't think that the need to have streetlights on between 4 and 5 in the morning is high at all. But there we are. Well, I think we've illustrated the problem over 3 different contributions. Just a couple of comments. One is yes, there's another easy win here, of course, which is that we'll have learned from COVID to change our behaviours in so many ways, which means that our footprint for offices is going to go down, which means that our travel will go down. So there are some more easy wins there. And we just need to be careful that we don't take our foot off the gas, to use a bad metaphor, when we think about some of the implications of that, because those easy wins will be converted into quite significant percentage reductions quite quickly, or hopefully will be, both in the current financial year and onwards as we adapt to this new normal. So the question or comment that follows on in a totally different way is that we will see inevitably a move from gas to electricity over the course of the next few years, and I just wonder whether there's anything we are doing to get ahead of the curve in that, given the fact there are obviously positive contributions in terms of carbon reduction here too.
Right, I'll invite Steve to answer that, and then I've got Adrian.
Don't think I've got any obvious answers to that one. It's a huge challenge, and we both in terms of capacity and in terms of buildings. So I plan to say more next year when we've looked at what the total emissions are and where we need to make our approaches. I mean, one of our big challenges, Keith, is in relation to embodied energy. It looks like the embodied energy in our annual construction activities is as much as our total energy spent in fuel and heating and lighting and the like. So, and you can't build less.
I don't.
Yeah. So in terms of electric, I think that's we're looking at things where we're doing developments, where we're promoting new developments to ensure that they are mostly electric, for example. But that's one of the challenges that we haven't yet addressed. But I definitely think we need to keep it on our agenda. So thank you for raising it.
Thanks.
Thank you. I think I saw Adrian's hand. Is yours still up, Keith? Adrian.
Thank you. Yes, I forgot that I also wanted to ask a rather minor question about REGOs.
Yes.
These are a concept I haven't come across before, or if I have, they just pass me by. Is it a new concept? Is it a new way of doing things? And does it have application beyond the, if I can call it the business world? I know, speaking to friends and colleagues about domestic purchase of energy, that they say, well, these companies say that they're green energy, but how do you know? And it seems to me something like a REGO system could have a much wider beneficial application.
Yeah, I agree. I'm only aware of it being available for large commercial or large users like us. They've not been around for long. My team brought them to my attention about 9 months ago, Adrian, and it was also because it's timely because we were re-procuring all of our energy purchase contracts. And we use an organization called Laser. We have a framework with framework purchase with Laser, and we've renewed that effectively. It was the best opportunity in the market, and that came in this month. So that does enable us, therefore, we've built into that contractual arrangement our ability to purchase REGOs. I mean, it's an early and quick and low cost win. However, I would say that if everyone in the market decided to purchase REGOs, then there wouldn't be enough to go around. So it's an interim position, I would suggest, which gives us a definite demonstration of our direction of travel as an organisation. And I know a number of other local authorities. I know Winchester City Council, I think, has agreed to purchase energy using REGOs. But what we just have as an aside, what we haven't yet done is build into the carbon reductions what the impact of the decarbonisation of the grid is over the last few years. That does also make an additional impact. So when you looked at that table in paragraph 24, we're down to under 29,000 tonnes. Using the new conversion factor, that would be less than 29,000 tonnes. So what I'm saying, members, is that over the next few months, we'll be rebasing our whole approach to how we measure and then how we tackle and how we prioritise dealing with those scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. But I'm not aware of anything in the domestic market that is available to prove what you're buying is green energy, Adrian.
Okay, thank you for that, Steve. Chairman, if you'll indulge me for a moment, I think going back to the street lighting issue, I think both Bill Withers and Keith House made very good points. I know the area of Aldershot that Bill represents very well, having been born and grown up there. And there are issues that need to be sensitively handled. And it may be that not a blanket approach is the best way forward, that we need to be sensitive to the needs of various areas. But Keith makes a good point. I look at the 1 o'clock switch off of lights, and okay, we're in COVID at the moment, so perhaps it doesn't apply at the moment. But I think of a lot of young people going to nightclubs that often don't close till 1 or 2 in the morning. Then they're coming home in pitch darkness, perhaps someone dropping off others, the one who didn't drink, dropping off those who did, who are stumbling their way home in the dark. All of these things, I think, need to be carefully thought about, and it might be that weekends it's a later switch off, but throughout the week it's a later switch back on. I think the whole thing needs to be carefully thought through, Chairman, but I'm sure there are opportunities there.
Okay, well, with the new LED lights, I think they can be individually controlled. So it might be that some fine tuning could deliver benefits. If I may, Steve, I've got a question. On some of the targets we've set ourselves, you've reported in this report that we are well advanced. We're going very fast, and that's really good. And it strikes me we have three options then as to how to respond to that. We could say, well, that one's done, let's coast for a few years, which I don't think members would like to see. The other is we could increase the challenge that we've set ourselves so that by that date the target is higher, or we could bring the challenge forward. The question, I suppose, is how do we review that position if we're doing very well against our targets?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Chairman. I think that's what I said earlier. It's about it's kind of a recalibration of our approach, and now thinking about it over the next 30 years to 2050. And so I'm sure I'll be back next year recommending that we're going to meet that 2025 target of 50% reduction. But it's such a small proportion of our overall scope of emissions now that we're looking at that I think will be a new approach next year in terms of both timescale and target and how much we can actually have control for the county council. I mean, the other thing the county council, as you know from the report that went to cabinet, is wrestling with is that all of the carbon emissions of the county of Hampshire, the county council is a very small percentage, 1 or 2%, I think. So there's an influencing role here, but what we're doing in the department in CCBS under Felicity's leadership is to really address and look carefully at the internal carbon emissions and do what we can to both measure those and come forward with plans to reduce those over time. But we're probably thinking about decade approaches. What do we do between now and 2030? Because 2010 doesn't seem that long ago, and actually, we've done quite a lot in that time. But the main point I want to make is that the challenge is much bigger, and that the carbon emissions are much greater, and we'll need a medium to long-term plan now.
Yes, the deputies who come to speak to us from the environmental groups would be disappointed if we left it a year, I think, to revise our targets. Having had this very positive report, I'm minded to suggest that we review whether we increase the targets or pull forward the dates now, okay, and set that as a precedent.
I don't think I'm in a position. I was thinking January would be a good time to come back and report, yeah, and on the set of in relation to the limited targets here on the smaller scope. But I think measuring the bigger scope is going to take us 3 or 4 months to get to a position where we're clear on the total in order to set some targets in the springtime, I would suggest.
Okay. Members, does that sound sensible? Silence is assent.
Agree.
Yeah,
agreed.
Thank you. Okay, we've got some recommendations here recommendations that progress on the energy and carbon reduction programme has been noted, that the further reduction in the County Council's carbon emissions to 2020 in relation to corporate buildings and so on be noted, that Black note the new context in which the carbon and energy programmes now sit and support the research into measuring the wider carbon emissions, and that we support the early work to define the challenge of achieving net zero carbon by 2050 in relation to the build to state. I've summarised those. I think what has also come out of it is that we might ask ETE to re-examine the street lighting issue with a view to making further savings if possible. And I think the if possible would summarise some of the reservations we heard. Ask the officers to consider the implications of switching from fossil fuels to electricity and what that's going to mean to us. Does that adequately summarise the conversations that we've had?
Yes.
Very good, Chairman.
Yep.
Yeah. Good. Is that agreed then?
Agreed.
Agreed.
And Emma, are you happy to capture those extra couple of points?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Well done, thank you. Right then, the final item on the agenda is Property Services Major Programmes Update. And I'm looking forward to seeing the Austin Academy on Friday, Steve.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm glad you'll make it there. Yeah, so I'll be brief in my introduction here. So this is really update in two areas. One is about what I call category development and construction framework management, where we have over the last few years brought together all of our spend activities into those 5 themes, as in paragraph 6. And with a view to being as efficient and as forward planned as we can in terms of our spend and procurement. Then paragraph 8 talks about our ongoing framework arrangements for facilitating construction activity in the region. And we're making good progress doing this in conjunction with Devon County Council. And more recently, we are developing a framework for housing, the delivery of housing, which we will do in conjunction with Devon and now with Birmingham. And then finally, recently, we have let a consultancy framework arrangement in collaboration with Devon and Manchester. The important point here is this is not only acting as facilitator for the provision of services and contractors to the public sector, but also it's an income generating activity for property, which has become an ever more important part of our activities over time. So in paragraph 12, it just illustrates that the levy we charge on our various contracting activities is just under £2 million, and that provides about an £800,000 contribution to overhead. And then finally, in the paragraph 17 onwards, Rebecca and Susan talked in their presentation and in the Bill to State report about works in relation to revenue and repairs and maintenance. And this summarises the activity that's been in relation to what we call our capital projects, particularly in relation to the Children's Services Schools programme. And I'm pleased to say that there was some slowdown early on in lockdown, but I was delighted that a remarkable set of achievements, and the contractors are to be congratulated for this in working with us, that there was no significant impact on the programme, of the whole programme, of all of the work, that we had on at that time. And most notably, I should say, the 2 new primary schools, one in Winchester in Barton Farm, and one in Eastleigh at Stoneham Park, opened on time in September for pupils to start the term. So an exceptional piece of work by the contractors to work with us. We worked very hard with them to support them in the nature of the activities that had to be COVID secure, and there was lots of constructive and helpful guidance coming from a national body to help us work with them to do that. And then the rest of the report illustrates and lists all the various projects we have on in terms of the school's capital programme. And that's all I wanted to say in terms of introduction, Chairman.
Yeah. Keith.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I would agree with Steve. The construction sector has actually done very well across the board, really, on projects. And given the fact there were significant impacts in the late spring and early summer, to be able to catch up on contracts has been really impressive. I've just got one question, just with my Procure local hat on, around Deer Park School, paragraph 24, which of course is Hedge End, Steve, not Botley. Okay. Which is that clearly when this report was written, was a few weeks ago now, and albeit taking account of the conversation we just had, are we really confident we're still on track? Because it's a very major project, and it's not absolutely not the most accessible of sites to get to either.
No, it's a really good point, Keith. And I was down. I took the opportunity. I was down there twice actually in the August period, and yes, they had some issues with supply, particularly of the concrete floor, early days, but they're still on program, and I can assure you we monitor that on a weekly basis. And I have got to know, as a result of that project, I've got to know the new regional director of Care, a lady called Louisa Finlay, and they understand the importance of that project. And so far, so good. Have you been to site, Keith? Have you had an opportunity to see it? No.
If that's an invitation, I'll gladly accept it,
Yeah,
Steve.
yeah. I'll try and get something organised.
That would be very good. And Rupert Curl, the County Council of the immediate patch, I'm sure will be very interested as well.
Yeah.
Be fantastic. And Kira are a great contractor. I've got a lot of time.
Yes. Good.
Fantastic reputation.
And they're working on, we're also working on the follow-on contract for the community facilities, community and sports facilities. So yeah, things going well, but I'll organise a visit.
Of which our great partner, an organisation named Eastleigh Borough Council, has forward funded the developer contributions ahead of them being paid by the county council to enable that to happen.
Good news.
A soft loan from Eastleigh, Hampshire. There
you go. Thank you, much appreciated.
Thank you, Keith, for not missing any opportunity. The meeting that Steve referred to in the report with my counterpart in Devon was an instant meeting of minds. That framework agreement, I think, is a very important thing, and it does show the expertise that local government has to bring to bear to help local government with capital schemes across the country. I'm very enthusiastic about that and hoping it'll carry on and flourish. Any other points we want to make to Steve? Because we are recommended to note the progress of each of the programmes of work. Are we happy to do that?
Very happy, Chairman.
Agreed.
Yeah,
which means that we have come to the end of the meeting. It's just gone 11:30, which for a heavy agenda, I think speaks to the efficiency of teams rather than the chairmanship. It's one of the things I've noticed about having virtual meetings. So members, thank you all very much for your attendance and your input. Thank you to the officers, and I'll declare this meeting closed. And Steve, we're getting together again